It says, chapter 10 of Acts, it says, at Caesarea, there was a man named Cornelius, a centurion of what was known as the Italian cohort, a devout man who feared God with all his household. He gave alms liberally to the people and prayed constantly to God. We just got done with the book of Mark in not Sunday school. And as we were discussing the fact of Jesus at his crucifixion, the centurion stood there and said, truly, this was the Son of God. Now, we're not sure if this was the same centurion or not, but a centurion is actually a Roman soldier in charge of 100 men. Centurion, that's where you get the century and 100. But it says he was known as the Italian cohort. He was from Rome. He was a Roman soldier. He was a leader of 100 men. But he was a devout man who feared God with all of his household. So not only did he, but also his wife and his kids, that they feared God. It says he gave alms liberally to the people and prayed constantly to God. Now, for those of you who know much about your history and about Rome, they had a lot of gods, didn't they? And yet here is a leader of 100 men, a centurion, that people looked up to. And it says he was well known and he was liked because of his actions in the world. I don't know how many people, something to think about. Vision, an angel of God coming in and saying to him, Cornelius. And he stared at him in terror and said, what is it, Lord? We just got done with the Christmas story, didn't we? And we heard about the angel coming to Mary. We heard of the angel coming to Joseph. We heard of the angel coming to Zechariah. We heard of the angels coming to the shepherds. Pretty scary stuff when you see something like that going on and suddenly there's this angel standing before you. And the angel came and said, Cornelius, and he said, what is it, Lord? The angels back in the Christmas story kept saying, fear not. Don't be afraid. Everything's all right. In the case of the angels, I bring you great news of joy. And he said to him, your prayers and your alms have ascended to his memorial before God. And now, send men to Joppa and bring me Simon, who is called Peter. He is lodging with Simon of Tanners that were with him. And having related everything to them, he sent them to Joppa. Now it says he was a man. He was in Caesarea. Caesarea is the capital of the Roman province of Judea. And believe it or not, that is the site of the first church of the Gentiles. That's where the first church took place. It just so happens that this centurion is there. And then he says, send your servants, send these three, your two servants and one of your soldiers, send them to Joppa to go look for a guy by the name of Peter. We all know who Peter was. Well, at least we should know who Peter was. He's the guy that walked on water. After he stepped out of the boat, oh yeah, and by the way, he sank until God took him back up. And Jesus fixed that. And now here's Peter, a devout Jew, and he's figuring out that he needs to be serving Jesus. He needs to be broadcasting the word of God. Cornelius is told by the angel, go get Peter. Now, why would a devout Christian, why would a devout follower of God have to go get Peter. The next day, verse 9. As they were on their journey and coming next to the city, or near the city, Peter went up on the housetop to pray. It was about the 6th hour. And he became hungry and desired something to eat. But while they were preparing it, he fell into a trance and saw the heavens opened, and something descending like a great sheet let down by the 4 corners upon the earth. In it were all kinds of animals and reptiles and birds of the air. And there came a voice to him. It says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." But Peter said, "No, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And the voice came to him again a second time. "What God has cleansed, you must not call common." This happened 3 times. And the thing was taken up at once into heaven. I don't know about you, but I don't get into a trance and I don't get sleepy when I'm hungry. I get up and I go walk around, go look at the refrigerator. I go look at the cupboards. I go look on the countertops, looking for something to eat. But here it says Peter falls into a trance after he had become hungry. And this large sheet drops from heaven. And on this sheet were all different kinds of animals. Animals and reptiles and birds, and I'm sure there was bugs and snakes and all kinds of stuff on this sheet. And the voice from heaven says, "Rise, kill, and eat. You're hungry, go get something to eat." How many of you walk to the kitchen when you're hungry and you walk in and say, "I really don't want that. I really don't want that. Oh, I'd really like to have." And here, this voice from heaven tells Peter, "Eat." And what's Peter's response? He says, "I have never touched anything. I have never done anything unclean or common." He's put some stipulations on what he can eat, doesn't he? He's trying to say, well, I don't want to touch that because that's ceremonially unclean. Now, I'm a good Jew here. I'm not going to eat that. And the voice has to tell him 3 times. 3 times. You almost wonder if that angel's kind of reaching up through that voice and just slapping him on the side of the head and say, "Listen, I'm trying to tell you something here." Parents, how many times do you have to tell your kids to do something? Don't answer that. Every kid's different, I know. Well, my son, when he was little, did something naughty. You can't believe that. Okay? And my wife asked him, "How many times are you going to do that?" And he says, "Oh, 1,000,000 or so." My daughter, on the other hand, you could look at her with that eye that only mothers can look at, and she was bawling her into a room. But here it says Peter has to be told 3 times, "Go ahead and eat." It wasn't a case of get up and go take a bite out of this. It was that whole part of a symbol. This is the idea that he's trying to get across from him. Go ahead and eat. And Peter says, "I'm not going to eat that." Now I want you to look at something though. When the angel tells Cornelius to send the 3 men, where does he tell him to send them? To Joppa, to go look for a man named Peter, who is staying at Simon the tanner's house. Let's do a little research on that. Simon the tanner. This is the guy who takes animal skins and makes them into leather to make products. Peter is a devout Jew. They're not supposed to touch anything ceremonially unclean. Even the stuff that is in the house, even the hands, the furniture, the floor, everything in that house would be ceremonially unclean, but yet Simon Peter is staying there. Why? Simon Peter was already stretching that boundary of what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And then when this angel, the sheet shop stops by, and he says, "Oh, no, I'm a good Jew. I can't do any of that." But where's he staying? He's already stretching that boundary. What God has cleansed, you must not call common. 3 times, and it was taken up to heaven. Verse 17. Is Peter home? Can he come out and play? That's literally what this verse is saying. Now, while Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision which he had seen meant, behold, the men that were sent by Cornelius, having made inquiry for Simon's house, stood before the gate. There's 2 stories going on here, isn't there? But is there? It's one story. Have you ever watched the CSI shows and all those kind of things, and you get this person, and all of a sudden this one over here dies, and somehow these 2 stories match? Well, here's the case of these 2 stories. Cornelius being contacted by an angel, and Peter being contacted by an angel, and their stories are going to intertwine. And they called out in verse 18 to ask whether Simon, who was called Peter, was lodging there. And while Peter was pondering the vision, the Spirit said to him, "Behold, 3 men are looking for you. Rise and go down and accompany them without hesitation, for I have sent them." How many of you ever tried to move a parked car? Any of you ever tried to push one? It don't work real well. Many years ago, church camp had the old fire truck. For those of you at church camp at Charles City, how many of you remember the fire truck? I got to drive it one time. Well, sort of. I was steering it. And it had the whole 3 cabins of boys behind us pushing this thing. And they pushed and they pushed and they pushed. They couldn't get anywhere. And then I realized I had my foot on the brake. Slowly took my foot off the brake. And it started to move. And these kids got excited. They were moving the fire truck. They were pushing it. And I took my foot all the way off the brake. And man, they got some going. And then up a little hill. Oh, we got up there, they got up across the hill. And down we going, yeah, now they're moving. And then I come up the other side of the hill. And it was as if I put the brakes on. Peter and Cornelius at this point are kind of like that story with the fire truck. God had set a plan in motion. God had everything available for this story to take place. God had set this plan in motion. He's got a vehicle moving in the likes of Cornelius, looking and searching and needing to know some answers. And he's got Peter sitting up here, and he's trying to figure out some answers. And suddenly you got the boys pushing and the foot off of the brake. And it's going to start going somewhere. God tells Peter to go down and let the men in. And then accompany them. Don't just go down and talk to these three guys. I want you to take a 32-mile trip. That's basically West Union to Oldwine. You're going to take off and you're going to walk on a 32-mile trip, and you're going to go down and you're going to talk to this Roman soldier. And you're going to tell him what I want you to tell him. Now, Peter's still got stuff going on in his mind about all this rise and eat and all these animals and what he's supposed to do. "21 says, and Peter went down to the men and he says, I am the one you were looking for. What is the reason for your coming? Why are you here? Why are you asking about me? You're not a local. Who are you? And they said, Cornelius, a centurion, upright and God-fearing man, who is well spoken of by the whole Jewish nation, was directed by a holy angel to send